My name is Olivia Shelton, and I'm doing my presentation on the Wildland-Urban Interface. So the Wildland-Urban Interface, or the WUI, isn't commonly known on its own, but it does tackle topics like wild vegetation in residential areas and how much of a risk it can be for property owners and the wildfire risk that is associated with it. So the WUI is just basically the amount of wild vegetation near or in residential areas, and how much of a problem it poses in those areas. So society is trying to solve the management of wildfire risk, property protection, sustainability in the environment, and land use. There are people affected by the WUI, like homeowners, emergency responders, local government officials, and local businesses. And this topic is really important because it addresses public safety and environment conservation. So there is a gap in this research. There is not that much research known on the dispersed housing development present in intermixed housing types, which means that we don't really know, as of right now, how dense or how spread apart housing is in certain areas, which does contribute to the WI index. Radloff and others mentioned that general spatial patterns of certain regions are not an artifact of the WI definition that they employed. So more research is needed to better assess the growing trends in the United States, which would allow for an accurate presentation of the WI in the United States. With the use of mapping technologies, the gap can be easily narrowed. So with mapping, we can actually figure out how much or how dispersed the housing is or how dense housing is in certain areas, which can contribute to the research, how much of a fire risk wild vegetation can be in certain areas with dense or less dense housing. So my research question is, how dispersed is the housing development in the different kinds of WUI areas? Which, if solved, this question can also be helpful to the research gap slide. My hypothesis is, if effective land use planning is necessary to decrease the risks associated with WUI, then we should implement regulations on zoning and fire safety codes. For the methods, first I will research the housing density and data on land coverage across the United States. Next, I will then research the housing unit counts from the United States. Next, I will research the collected vegetation data classes in the United States. Then research the housing density and percentage of wildland vegetation for every census block, and analyze maps of the WUI. So these are the expected results. This is actually a map that I found on Radloff's website, or on Radloff's article, scientific article. This map shows how dense or how close together, how dense or how spread apart housing is in certain areas. So the greener areas on the map show like low density or just no housing at all, which can pose a fire risk on its own, but it also means that less people are at risk. But it is important to know this because with low density housing in these areas, it is a higher chance of wildfire risk, which means that it's a higher chance that properties are at risk of fire too. So the red and orange and yellow areas are more dense housing, which usually has less wild vegetation, meaning that those areas are less likely to be at risk of wildfire. But it is really important because this map is mostly showing low density housing areas, which means that the wildfire risk is greater in a majority of the United States, which is an issue. So in conclusion, the wildland-urban interface is very important to know. It is very important for the public safety and also environmental conservation. Thank you.